This is a poem from my maternal grandparents, my mom's folks, and it's called Cosmos. My grandma grew cosmos, famously. A farmer's wife who always had kitchen garden going where flowers grew too, in orange and yellow hues, just as vital as carotene. Color of carrots she fed me once, raw, pulled from the ground, still tasting like soil. I'd never had them that way, not being from the Midwest. Rural corner of Minnesota where my mom grew up on a rented farm outside the small towns there. Not a townie though, like the kids from Money. Still, my mom made salutatorian. Would have been valedictorian too if Ann Mears hadn't cheated. Just kidding, she says. And that was how she got to go to college where she did meet some man and drop out to marry, just like my grandma said she would if she bothered with college. Only girl in the family to go. She went back and finished, dear reader, don't worry. And the only one to marry in color, move back to South Texas with my brown Tejano dad, and never go back, never even miss those Minnesota winters. Minnesota is Minnesota in Dakota Sioux, meaning land where the waters reflect the skies. A watery place of landlocked lakes I've never lived, but whose soil made me still. Land of Line 3, cutting through Monument wetlands sacred to Ojibwe. Prairied, storied land of Plum Creek, of Little House fame. Books I read too, even here in South Texas. Half Mexican and even still never knowing the other side, the Indian side of the story. Land of you bet and, I suppose, of corn-fed, woebegone niceness now belied and blood-spattered by George Floyd's murder. Land of 1,000 massacres, not so different from here, this land of 1,000 missions, insisting there are no Indians left in Texas, only Hispanics. Psst. Just look around. Where do you think brownness comes from anyway? And yet, I found, in a Ziploc of clippings my mother saved from my grandparents' NFO days, an op-ed by my Irish grandfather, a tenant farmer, supporting the right of brown farm workers to organize out west, far from the Minnesota prairies where there were no Mexicanos or Filipinos, where farm labor was more apt to be white high schoolers hired for the summer or your own kids working for free. But Grandpa sided with Chavez beneath his Virgen banner, rather than follow the poisonous siren call of whiteness to abandon solidarity, rather than betray other salt of the earth for those same corporate interests he fought in the National Farmers Organization. I just finished reading an article in your paper, he wrote. It states most farm operators oppose unionization of farm labor. I have news for you. Any average farm operator who opposes unionization would be foolish, to put it mildly. What better way could there be to curb the steady advance of corporate farming? I see no reason why farm labor shouldn't have a decent living wage like any other labor. Signed, a farm operator, Jim Foley, Slayton, Minnesota. And this, decades before he could even imagine he might have half Mexican grandkids, to make it personal, instead of a matter of simply being a good ancestor, someone who sincerely believed in the rights of the poor to a decent and dignified life. And his farmer's wife, my grandma, grew cosmos in her garden, each year saving the seeds to plant the following spring parsimoniously. And when she died, each child and grandchild received a small plastic baggie of seed, her ashes and estate, all the wealth that was left, which I never planted, always moving too fast to tend to the earth in a physical way, whatever my politics or lineage. Not even this past pandemic spring, when we put in a pollinator garden for crashing monarch populations, the whole planet convalescing from COVID, coughing from carbon, cosmos came up anyway, half the contents of a bag of native wildflower seed we spilled that spring. I even thought they were weeds at first, decorative hybrids, the bag maybe cut with false filler. Not realizing C. sulphureus, a cousin to marigold, is native to Greater Mexico, named Cosmos in the 1500s by Spanish colonial priests who admired its orderly organization of petals about a center. How colonial indeed, right? And took them back to the metropole, only to be re-imported to this hemisphere. Mexico, to Madrid, to Minnesota. Beloved blossom held in common by the butterflies and bees and abuelitas across disparate lands. In November, you will see them driving by on the way to West Side Y. The evidence in a preponderance of orange at San Fernando No. 2, where my other ancestors lie. The cempasúchil that marks that day we remember the dead. Knowing this, I lay these words down, scatter my inheritance, bag of seed to the wind. See what comes up.